Hi, everybody. My name is Brian James Polak, and I'm a playwright, and I host a podcast called The Subtext, where I interview playwrights. And that is why I'm here today, to interview these lovely playwrights who also happen to be writers for television. And I think we want to start off just by going down the row and introducing yourselves.
I'm Bekah Brunstetter, and I write for This Is Us.
I'm Nick Jones. I write for Glow.
I'm Molly Smith-Metzler. I write for Shameless.
I'm Steve Yockey, and I write for Supernatural.
Really quick, I want to start off by just thanking Dennis Baker and the SAG-AFTRA Foundation for having us here, because I think this is a really fantastic organization, and I'm psyched that theater and playwrights are getting a bigger spotlight. And the reason I'm thinking that is because I've lately been thinking about how our society seems to not be intertwined with the theater as much as it might be in other countries. Yet, I feel like we're in this moment where all of our great television shows are staffed greatly with playwrights. I'm wondering if anybody has an opinion on why now so many playwrights happen to be writing in television so much more than it seems ever.
I mean, I hear this question a lot, and I know what you're saying, but a lot of actors start off doing plays, you know. So it seems to make sense on one level that writers would start out in theater and then move into television or film. Not that television and film is the goal, you know, and that it's just a stepping stone, but it's like it's the medium that doesn't require as much, at least when you start doing it, you know, in college. They give you a stage. You can practice writing plays for your friends. So I feel like a lot of writers learn the craft of writing for people that are humans or puppets or whatever, doing plays. So, I mean, and I know, especially in Hollywood, there's people that start out writing just films and never have that step, but we did or do.
I think that there's like a metric ton more product coming out now, and there's a lot more aesthetic diversity in television. So there's a much broader range of writers being hired to do the work now because there's more work. And also playwrights are, I was watching the video and Lily Tomlin made me feel very comforted before I walked up here. Which is what she does. I think that also in the same way that video was, you know, actors are storytellers, playwrights are storytellers, and we already know how to do that work. So I think it's very easy to insinuate us into a writer's room with other writers who've come from different backgrounds. We can blend well.
And this question's for really any of you. Do you think there's a particular skill set that a playwright brings to a writer's room that perhaps another TV writer might not have?
Yeah, I think Steve kind of just said it. Like, we're really collaborative. Like, we start with something in our heads, and then it's not really real until we're in a room creating it with other people. And on the staff of a TV show, you're in a room with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other people every day creating something together. And I feel like we know how to, like, it's that we have experience having that tough balance between sort of like a humbleness when it comes to the process, like not thinking you're right all the time, but at the same time, like an authority over the story that you're telling. And I think that like playwrights are just comfortable in that space.
Yeah, there's a reason we're not novelists. You know, we don't want to be alone in a tower writing a text. We want to play with you guys, you know. And I also think there's a lot of playwrights in television right now because we're wanted here. You know, it's sort of, it can be a sad endeavor to be a playwright in New York sometimes, and you know, we end up feeling like we're in that tower even if we don't want to be in that tower. And out here in television, you know, the stories have changed. Our voices are wanted. You want to play with us, so it's very we feel very welcome here too. I think is sort of practical truth. I do anyway.
Yeah, it's not just money.
No.
I think that's a myth that people, especially when people write about playwrights leaving New York for LA. I feel like there's this story that I hear repeated all the time that people are like lured out, with money. But when I moved to LA to start writing for television, I found it very gratifying creatively as well, because people are actually more open-minded to like a wider breadth of ideas in television, because everything is on television right now. So if you have an idea, there's probably a number of places that will at least consider it, and maybe one that will, give you a lot of money to make it. Whereas in theater, especially like off-Broadway theater, or there's really just like New York is the main destination, and there's only like 4 places, and most of the plays, don't take place in space or underground or any of the things that you may or may not want to do in your stories, but you could if it was in a different medium.
I think a way that money does make a big difference is that even the lowest budget television show you can imagine has a higher budget than the highest budget of a play. And so you get to do things that you just would never get to do. I mean, you can do anything in theater. That's the magic of it. The audience shows up ready to like make things happen with their mind for you, but it's also really cool to actually make those things happen with somebody else's money. Like, that's very cool. So
I know you're saying that perhaps money isn't the number one motivator for getting into television. I'm curious.
I did not say that. I had student
Nick loves
loans,
money
so.
too. He's just pretending.
I hate money.
He would like to give you his money after this. He hates it so much.
My television show is sponsored by a non-profit organization called Netflix.
We actually all live together in one apartment.
I had a question in there somewhere. I seem to have lost it.
You said money's not important.
Right. So I'm curious, everybody here came up or is coming up through the theater, and I'm wondering, if not money being the primary motivating factor, what motivated you to say, I want to explore television?
I'll say for me, I feel like this is what's happening to playwrights now in New York. It happened to me after a few years after grad school. I've been doing it for a while, and I feel like now it happens to playwrights almost even in their first year of school. Your agent or a manager or someone who works at a fancy theater who has read your work will say to you, "Are you interested in doing TV?" And of course you say yes, because why would you? Because you want to make a living as a writer, and being paid to write sounds amazing in whatever form that takes. So I think, like, for a lot of playwrights, it's not even so much like, for some playwrights, it's not like deciding to pursue it. Like, the question is sort of brought to you and laid in front of you, and you sort of say, of course, I would like to explore that. And then playwrights have like all sorts of different processes of getting there.
It's not either or.
Yeah,
like
totally.
It's not sacrificing theater for this other medium. Like, you have to make money somewhere, and you don't make it in theater unless you're on Broadway. There's a couple people on Broadway, but I don't think the represented
not
here.
enough. Not enough.
Sorry, none of us have shows on Broadway right now.
Well,
Have your money back.
The Tonys were last night, and
That's why we're
None of
here.
us won any.
flight. Do you see a lure to TV that could take people out of the theater forever? Is there like a temptation to just, what I'm saying?
Controversial hot take. Here's a hot take for the internet. I've noticed that the playwrights that I know who tend to start, I feel like I'm like curled into a ball down here. The playwrights that who I know that have drifted away from writing plays in once they started television are generally playwrights who wrote very naturalistic, sort of wrote the kinds of things that they can be satisfied writing on television. And the playwrights that I've noticed who continue to like chug ahead with the theater stuff tend to be the people who take advantage of the theatricality that theater offers that you don't often. So it's really about satisfying that muscle. I think if you can walk away from theater, like more power to you. I don't know. I would go insane because my plays are so not at all what I'd ever be allowed to put on television. So it's, that's anecdotal. That's not, please don't. But now it exists on YouTube forever.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, writing a play is how I sort through my own feelings. It's literally the only way I know how to do that. So if I'm not working on a play, I feel like so emotionally frustrated that I can't think my own thoughts. So for me, that's kind of kept me there. But it's certainly slowed. But I think that a lot of playwrights have found a really lovely balance between doing the TV work and then working on their plays on the weekends or over hiatus or wherever they can.
Yeah, I would sort of say the same thing. There seems like there's a nice community of playwrights in Los Angeles that we're all sort of friends. And most of us are all writing plays as well as television.
Yeah.
The people I've observed who have moved away from theater is because they've had a bad experience in the theater. And that can happen, and I kind of understand it happening. But I think if you're lucky, you're doing both. You're swimming forward and backwards in the same pool of creativity.
Something you touched on, Steve, about the style of your plays and how you're not going to get that Jones by writing on television. But there's something about, and this is true for each one of you on stage. If you don't know their plays, you should absolutely know their plays as well as the shows they work for, because each one of these playwrights are unique unto themselves and just fantastic writers. And you as a playwright spend all this time as you're learning, you're going through grad school and you're writing plays and you're cultivating your voice and you're figuring out what is uniquely you for the stage. And then you get on a TV show and you're writing for pre-existing characters and like a show that you're not defining it like you are in your own play. How do you navigate that, and how do you find your own self inside this?
It's a very good question. Molly, you're going to say something?
I was going to say, I feel like there's kind of two muscles of working in television, and one is incredibly in your voice and the other sort of isn't. But when you're in the room and you're figuring out what stories we're going to tell this season, what we're excited about, what characters are going to do, you've been hired because of your voice. The showrunners read our plays and said, oh, I think she would really have some great ideas. So in the room, it's all about who you are, your stories, your experiences, your voice as a writer. But then when you go off to episode, you are, emulating someone else's voice, and that is a different skill set, but it's still helpful to bring your voice to it. I think when you read a really special script, it captures the voice of the show, and then there's a little extra in it. There's like a little of another human in it. And I don't know, you can just tell right when you watch like a great episode of television, there's sort of like, it is the show and then it also pushes the show. And so I feel like our voice is still there, but more so in the room.
It also, I think, depends on the type of, not the type of show, but the type of process that your showrunner has, because you can be in a situation where you're in a room where the show that I'm on right now, we have a tremendous amount of creative freedom with the episodes that we write, because part of the cachet of the show is that the different writers sort of have different signatures. So it's okay for that to come through in an episode, and the showrunner preserves it for you. There's but then I've been on some shows where the showrunners do a pass on all the scripts, and the scripts sort of all move towards the showrunner's voice. And so, how much your individual voice gets through, I think, depends on the type of show you're on, but also like where our job is to exist within the continuity of somebody else's. I mean, unless you're lucky enough to have your own show and then you've got other people doing it for you.
Yeah, I find that part of it to be so liberating, like the fact that when I'm in rehearsal for a play, it is all about my idea and it's up to me to figure out exactly what I'm trying to say. And then when I'm at work for a TV show, I'm essentially like a hired hand, like helping execute someone else's vision. And it's not all up to me. And I like that about the process. It's sort of like relaxing in a weird way, just because it's not up just to me to have a profound idea or to, like use something from my life to create the story. It's about, all of the people working on the show. So I like that about it.
If you're in a good environment, it's great to like ask for help. I didn't realize I could do that at first, and then when I did, I was like, wow, this is great, because you never will get stuck because someone can always help you, and that's why I suppose one of the reasons why you can produce 13 or 24 hours of television in like half the time it takes to write and produce a play, if that.
You know what else is fun is the reception. So if you write a play and you get the worst reviews anyone's ever seen, which has happened to me, it is entirely your fault. It's your name on the script. And like, so for instance, I wrote for Orange is the New Black last season, which is just on right now. And there's a couple of episodes that are, a little controversial. And it's sort of fun because the way I feel about it is like, well, the 8 of us figured that out together. It's kind of on all 8 of us, and that's very liberating. Like Bekah said, it's when when you're the playwright, it is 100% your fault.
Though I will say I love that, and I at first my first writing gig on TV was for Awkward on MTV, and which was the weirdest place for me to land, but it was super fun. I wrote. I felt the same way, like, well, it's all of us. And then I wrote an episode that had a moment in it that a lot of people didn't appreciate. And I still get emails. And that was 5 years ago. And I still get emails from people who are just discovering that moment in that show.
You need a fake name on Facebook. Are these
Well,
Facebook
it's not
messages?
even Facebook. It's because I have a website for playwriting and things, and so you're accessible in a weird way, and you can filter it out. But it's just I only got to live in that warm bubble for one season.
I think you should all tell us the episode.
What?
I think you should all tell us the episode.
I don't remember the episode. There was a character who was very, very. There was a character who was very, very religious, and she was going through a crisis of faith. And she stood up in the middle of a team building exercise and yelled, "God is an asshole," and that just didn't go over well with people. Like, I mean,
Can't imagine.
let me say this: it was
Who knew?
earned. It was an earned moment.
I'm wondering if anybody has a signature or something that you write, an Easter egg that you plant in your scripts that maybe only you know, or maybe your friends and family would know. Perhaps God is an asshole is like the
Every episode.
I think one of my first TV bosses, he would say that like there's one thing you can never do. You can never, after 2 people in a TV show have sex, you can never have them say that was amazing. Like, don't ever do that. And I feel like I've done that. I've put that in a couple of scripts just because I can. And sometimes that's what you say. It's like, that was amazing. I feel like, anyone else?
Well, I have things that were drilled into my head working with. I also worked on Orange before Molly, and Gingy has a real problem with a lot of things, but one in particular is people like talking to themselves.
Oh,
but
yes.
That's not allowed. So if someone's just
No,
like,
no.
where are my keys? Like, she's like, people never talk to themselves. I talk to myself all the time. So I beg to differ, but you still can't break the rules of the showrunner. But even when I write alone, I'm a little bit brainwashed. So
I think you'll appreciate this too. She is very, no underlining or ital in the dialogue, and no parentheticals like angry, and it's out of respect for actors. Like, don't tell anyone how to do their job.
We do that on Supernatural too. Like, we don't. I mean, they've been. We're in season 13, so like we don't put parentheticals in our script for how the actors should interpret the characters they've been playing for 13 years. And nor do we want to, but like it's just that was one of the things when I first came onto the show. I think I had like 1 or 2 parentheticals in my script, and they went away. And I was like, oh, was it because you want to know how your showrunner is interpreting what you're giving them? So just I remember we were at lunch or something, and I was like, oh, was there like what was that? He was like, you really don't need to tell them how to do their jobs. And I was like, oh, okay, got it.
I would appreciate it as an actor, frankly, but I'm not an actor.
Sometimes they're for us. And
Be ambiguous, you know.
Yeah,
so-
no harm.
Steve, you mentioned before about how you have all this freedom on your show, as like the writers have all this freedom with their scripts, and I'm curious if the others can talk about the sort of structure of the writers' room and how scripts are divided up. And I'm curious if they look at Playwrights and say, oh, this is like a playwright script that we need this week, or are moments divided up? Are characters?
There's not a lot of plot. They're just like playwright it.
Yeah, you just playwright that. Playwright that.
Just dialogue it up.
Oh, but there is a
Dialogue 60 pages.
But I did have a showrunner who used the phrase playwriting to describe when the people talk about things that you didn't see on camera. Like, oh, just playwright it.
Yeah, exposition.
Yeah.
Oh, great, thanks.
Playwright it is definitely a verb. Playwright it.
You mean
That
like
is something you learn. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. But that's something you learn, I guess, is how to use exposition to just talk about things you can't show.
Right, are playwrights leaned on in a different way in the writers' room than other writers?
I think we're supposed to be weirder,
They kind of make fun of you. If you're
Check.
the only playwright in the room, there's going to be some
Oh.
comments, and they'll defer to you for certain things. Be like, well, what's happening in New York, even if you haven't lived there for years. But
How do you feel about this Chekhov reference?
yeah. I mean, there was a time on Orange when there was 2 playwrights, and there was just one, and then it was me for a little while, and then there was a whole bunch of playwrights, and I did not like it because I enjoyed not getting catty about New York theater stuff, and if there's sometimes when playwrights are together, all these like wounds are picked at, and
we're all really hurting right now, just sitting next to each other.
yeah, I feel
We're here for 90
I feel
minutes. We've
terrible
got
just
time.
being with you guys. It's great to see you. But like I found a sort of liberation in not talking about theater for a while, and then Jordan Harrison came, and it was all over.
Ruined it.
on This Is Us, the scenes tend to go on a bit longer than a scene normally would on a network show. And my boss, Dan Fogelman, oftentimes refers to scenes as little plays. And as soon as I heard him start talking that way about the stories we were going to tell, I got really excited because it just, one of my first jobs was on an ABC family show called Switched at Birth. And we did like I produced like 60 episodes or something, and we packed so much story into the scenes, and everything would just get edited down and cut, and we basically had no time for slow, unnecessary character moments. And I feel like playwrights love nothing more than a slow, unnecessary character moment, and it's rare that we get to do those on television. So I'm enjoying getting to do a little bit of that on This Is Us right now.
Have there been moments on any of your shows where your darlings were killed for you, and you are still holding on to them?
What do you mean? Like you're like still raw about it?
No, not you had this idea and it got cut. Can you
That's
think
every
of
day.
any
Every day.
examples
Every
of
day.
something that got cut and you
It's
just
every
wish-
day. That's
It's all the
happening right
time.
now. Yeah.
I feel like
I'd like to cut that question.
But sometimes they'll make it the worst. I think iteration of it is when they make it all the way through filming and then disappear in post. Because
That's the actors too.
after you get to do your writer's notes or your writer's pass, then a lot of other people see it, and then you see the episode, and so it's always exciting when something like some cute little thing that you think is just the most magic moment ever, which could be, is like makes it all the way to that and then vanishes in post. But But yeah, I had a really stupid moment on a show that I was on that I just thought was the best thing since sliced bread. My showrunner was like, "I just want to let you know, I'm gonna run with this, but the network is gonna give us a note on this." And I was like, I can, yeah, it's okay. Like, I got it. Like, and they did give a note, and on the notes goes like a group notes call. I feel like I'm getting too specific with the story. It was a group notes call, and I was like, "Oh yeah," and I said the executive's name like I had some sort of authority, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that was me. I did that. I just, I'm sorry. I'll take it out now or whatever." And that executive was like, "Okay." So it came out, and then 4 months later, they were talking to me about some other project, and in the middle of that meeting, that moment came up. Like, "Well, we know how you tend to hang on to things." And I was like, "Oh." And then afterwards, like, my agent called me and was like, "I heard the meeting went really well." And I was like, "I thought it went really well." And I had kind of like let that just move through me. You have to let things move through you in those meetings or else you're like, and then he goes, "But they did mention this thing about this glass of orange juice." And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So sometimes they go away and haunt you.
I've heard you're a real diva.
Fact.
I just met you. So.
You mentioned this group notes, which is something that I guess there is maybe a translation from that to working in the theater, getting notes. But was there any culture shock when you first got into television? Were there any specific examples you can think of that took you by surprise?
It's weird that everything happens through a phone. Like, so rarely are these people, your executives on the show that you're writing for, if they were sitting in here, I don't know if I would know them on this. Like, because they, or at least on previous shows, we would sit around a phone and get these notes. It's like, who are these people? That's strange, because usually in the theater, like, you're getting notes from the artistic director, whoever, and they're a human being who's in front of you. But in TV, oftentimes they're in Burbank and you're in Santa Clarita, and they're coming out of a phone. And it's just strange, because it's hard to like feel where the note is coming from. It's easier to get a critique from someone when they're sitting in front of you. So I thought that was like a sort of a shock.
I had culture shock not from executives, but from the thing in the writer's room, that there's kind of an expectation that you're just going to share everything that you've ever experienced with no filter. Like, I remember, so my first job as I wrote for an HBO miniseries with Steve McQueen, who was amazing. Oh yeah, he's the best. And he was so gracious and lovely to all of us. But on the first day of the room, it's my first job. He's, giving a kind of pep talk about the season, and then he said, "We're going to start by talking about how we're all racist. Molly, why don't you start?" And frankly, like, we did have a candid conversation about race the rest of the day, which is what we were writing about. But I remember kind of going home, and my husband was like, "How was television?" And I was like, "Well, I guess we're racist. I mean, but even in Orange and the New Black, like, it was not uncommon to say what drugs are we all on, who's on what antidepressant, who's, and like, who had sex with their husband last night, did you do anything kinky? Like, just, there's like a real level of we're generating, especially in like cable, we're generating edgy stories we're expected to kind of share. So that was a culture shock for me. Did anyone else have that? No?
Yeah. I mean, I had the sensation of, not a sensation. I couldn't understand it was really a job, because like my first 3 months, I think we just like talked about our families and like our childhoods, and I was like, don't we have like a deadline? Like, when do we actually start making the show? And we were on Universal Studios, and we could go on the rides, and there were a lot of like half days. And it was amazing. I mean, no one was complaining, but I was happy that I wasn't the one that had to watch the clock, because it seemed. And then it all happened, and it was just like magic.
And the amount of time devoted to what we're eating for lunch and then what we're eating for snack, it's like, it's the stuff of dreams. I mean, you're a solid hour every morning. What are we gonna eat today? Do you guys have this? Yeah. No.
We're terrible people.
Can you talk a little bit about the hierarchy of the rooms? Like you mentioned how Nick, you took comfort in knowing that you're not in charge, so you're just along for the ride.
Well, I think, it depends on the room. I've only been in Genji Kohan land my whole career, I guess. So, and that's a very particular room where no one's ever pulled rank except the one person who's clearly in charge. And I think it creates a very healthy sort of ecosystem. But, once you write your script, that also means like every single other person is equally an authority on why it sucks, and you have to at least pretend to take their notes, or give them consideration. It's a discussion.
I'm so excited about being on a show with you now.
Is that happening?
It's gonna be great.
Okay, yeah.
You never know. The way you cycle through.
Well,
I just mean like
Not
I've
you.
heard horror stories, and I've count my lucky stars every day that I'm not living one of those horror stories.
I think that's like my expectations were. I had heard a lot of people talk about how difficult television is and how it crushes your creativity, and like you go in and you just get hammered and all that stuff, and not hammered drinking, like hammered by notes and stuff. And
Sometimes drinking.
And then but so then I haven't found the experience to be that intense. Like the way that it was presented is it's going to be very, very difficult, and you're going to get beat up a lot. Hasn't really happened, and so in that respect, it makes it a lot easier when the bad stuff does happen to be like, well, at least I'm not getting my ass kicked.
There was the orange juice incident, and that's
We all heard. We all heard
it's
about
not
that.
so bad.
I really enjoyed, because when you start in TV, you start as a staff writer, and then you go to story editor, and then you go to producer, and then so there is like this hierarchy, and then it goes all the way up to executive producer, and it really just mostly tells you how much you get paid. That's technically what it is, but in some rooms there's a little bit of hierarchy. Like the higher up people will sort of have slightly more responsibility. And I really appreciated when I was just starting being a staff writer because it meant that I was just there to learn. And I didn't mind like running off and writing scenes for a new character for auditions, and I liked the feeling of being useful and helpful. And when you're new in a TV room, you're sort of like, what the hell is going on? What is this process? And it was kind of nice to be at the bottom and just like watch everything and learn that way.
So do you feel a stronger sense of responsibility now?
I do. And honestly, like I went from staff writer to like executive story editor on one show. I was there for 3.5 years. And then I started on a brand new show as a producer. And that really fucked with my head because I didn't really know what that meant. I knew how that worked on Switched at Birth because I was there for so long and we all like understood how we worked together and all of that. And then I found myself on a new show with this title, producer, which means a zillion different things depending on the show. But I felt like I was supposed to sort of like lead with a certain level of authority, but I didn't really know what that looked like. It's a little clearer on This Is Us. And I think like, for example, last season was, we're on set for our episodes, and I was on set with our staff writer for her episode as well as mine, just sort of like to be there if she had questions. So it's more like big brother, big sister sort of stuff than it is like boss stuff in the middle.
So much of it is, I do feel like so much of it is, and even having gone through a graduate program that had a TV component, so much of it is learn on the job, and a lot of that comes from the producer level people who are above you initially, and how willing they are to not even take you under their wing, but like explain certain things the same way those things were explained to them. And so in that way, it does feel like it moves from generation to generation of writers in a way that it just sort of happens.
And you've found that there's been a willingness for the more veteran.
Yeah. I think probably some people are not into it, but I have not found one of those people. And if there is someone like that on your show, there's probably 2 other people who aren't like that, who are willing to kind of walk you through things if they're not too busy.
As playwrights, we become very accustomed to our relationship to the production and to the people, the participants in the production, in particular the directors. So we have we know what the relationship between a playwright and a director is when we're working on one of our plays. Can you talk about the relationship between the writer and the director on your TV shows and what that is like in each of your situations? If you have a regular director who comes in or constant turnover in guest directors?
Well, the directors that direct television are like a special type of director in most cases, and schedule obviously, but it's much more leisurely. The first episode I wrote that I was on set for, I immediately got yelled at by the director for talking to the actor, which I thought was weird, because I thought that was what I was on set to do, to sort of be a resource, and I like to tweak things. Working on plays, and anyways, I was told that was inappropriate. But that director, he kept working on the show, and so did I. And eventually, I talked to the actors, and it's not a big deal. But I think he was trying to enforce a sense of professionalism that was also sort of so he wouldn't be stressed out, because if an actor came, I think an actor did complain about me, actually. Now that I remember, that I got in their head or something. But I didn't mean to do that. And there was an art I had to learn to, the machine is moving forward very quickly, and you can't. Suggest an alt line right before someone's about to shoot.
You have to choose your battles.
Yeah, you definitely.
Another thing is, it's not a given that we're on set. This is another sort of surprise about starting in television is, some shows you write your episode of television, then you really produce it, which means you were on set, sitting next to the director, working intricately with the actors. But then there's other shows where the writers never leave the room. Like I just did a couple seasons of Casual, and it's like that. It's we write them, and then we turn them over, and we have no idea what they've shot or how it's going to look or what changed. Or and so on shows like that, I have to Google who directed my episode. Whereas, like on Orange, I was sitting right there interacting with the cast, giving feedback to the director. I had a great director. So
Who'd you have?
I had Phil Abraham.
He's the best.
He's the best. Yeah. And I actually, it was the best experience that I've had, working with actors. The medium was so fun and fast, and I felt really valuable in the sense that, I just cheerleaded for everybody, because I didn't know how to give any notes. I don't understand what you geniuses do. But it was really, it's really fun. And then it's amazing that a lot of writers on wonderful shows don't leave the writer's room. So that was a sort of surprise, too. A lot of us don't have relationships at all with our directors.
What sort of relationships do you have with actors? Do you have actors pitching to you and maybe lobbying for things?
I've found that I've become friends with some actors from shows that I've worked on, which has been awesome, because I love actors. We're playwrights, we love actors. But I do think it can get tricky because I've mostly had bosses that will say to the writer, I need you to make sure we get this outcome. This is why you're on set. So don't let this happen. Don't let that happen. And because you've been given this task, you're oftentimes having to adjust the actors either through the director or to the actors, whatever, based on what the director prefers. And if you're buddy-buddy with the actors, that really makes that moment really weird. And it's kind of a bummer, because I wish I could just be friends with everyone. But it is strange to have to give your friend a note, Yeah, but it's always, I feel like everybody usually always gets along. You just don't want to form super intense friendships with the actors on your shows.
You also spend so much time. I'm just curious if you guys have had this experience, especially from being on the set so much, but you spend so much time talking about the show, and you're so far in the writer's room ahead of where production is, if things are going smoothly, that it's very easy to tell the actor something that they don't need to know yet, and not in a bad, but that can affect what's happening. It's very easy to tip that scale, and I was on a show once where one of our writers said something to an actor that sort of let that actor know he wasn't going to be on the show anymore after a certain point. And it became a little bit of a thing. And so it was just about, and so I think navigating that can be really tricky, and it just means that you have to keep your guard up a little bit, which is why I think sometimes actors experience writers as slightly guarded, and it's not because we don't want to be your best friends. It's because sometimes we're not sure exactly what
We see the future, and we're not allowed to tell you.
But I mean, do you know what I mean? That with that feeling. It's a weird alchemy, that situation.
Do any of you secretly wish you could be on camera?
Absolutely
I had a small
not.
cameo
Have you?
as a puppet. Yeah. I was gonna be a child molester on that same season, but then I decided that was not gonna help me in my life, so I settled for just a voice acting role.
I really
Didn't help me either. So.
I really did. I dislike being on camera, having pictures taken, being in front of people. Like, this is, like I said, Lily Tomlin made me feel better before I walked up here. But yeah, I mean, that's why I'm a writer and not in the other arts.
We do show up in scripts, though, our names, for instance. Like, I've been Officer Metzler. I've been Molly the dog.
They won't let us we can't put other people's names into the...
Not my scripts, like someone else.
No, I know, but I mean, like, I can't put, like, if I wanted to put another writer's name into my script,
Officer Yockey? No.
they would come, like, for me. Like, the clearance people would be like, we know what you're doing, stop it. Warner Brothers is not interested.
What if it just rhymed with your name?
Hockey.
Breve Stocky.
I'd get in trouble, though. I'd end up with Jockey real fast, and then it would go downhill from there. We're not really edifying you anymore. No, it's just... if we were at some point.
I will say that this is interesting. Maybe I don't know, because that wasn't on This Is Us. Milo and Mandy, who play the two of the main people, are super empowered by the showrunner to, when they get scripts, they'll email us and come by and talk to us and say, like, I love this, but I have this other idea, and what do you think of this? And this doesn't track with that. And we're so grateful that they are able to do that, and they're right most of the time. And we've gotten some beautiful monologues out of their ideas. And then additionally, Justin Hartley, who plays Kevin, and Chris Sullivan, who plays Toby, which are, most of them are theater actors, by the way, and Sterling K. Brown, too, also theater actor. They all are empowered to improvise a little bit, which I think is why this show feels so alive. So on this show in particular, when I'm on set, I'm not necessarily like, say what I wrote, because I would never say that to Sterling. That would be terrifying. But I really enjoyed that on this show, that the actors feel like they're able to say stuff like that. I think that's really cool. And it reminds me of theater, because that's so often what a play rehearsal is like.
Are there any moments that you've written that when you saw them in their final after editing, they surprised you how they turned out, whether it is through improvisation or just through visual elements that you didn't expect?
I feel like that happens a lot, like mostly in a good way. I mean, the cool thing about it, I think Bekah alluded to this at the beginning, is this idea of collaboration. And as playwright, I know that I have a lot of opinions about what the lights should be, what the sound should be, but I'm not a lighting designer. That's not my trade. I'm not a sound designer, and I know those people are gonna take what I think is a good idea and make it even better, for the most part. And so the end product is going to be greater than whatever I initially imagined, because experts in each of these fields are coming to the actors, are going to bring their own special expertise and experiences to it. And I feel like that happens in television too. It just happens like across the board, because then editing is an insanely magical skill. Like what comes out of the editing room is not what you wrote, and it's not what got filmed. It is a third thing, and good editors are gold. And so what's going on in post, and that's true of people that do post-production in terms of VFX for our show. VFX for our show is very important, and people do just a beautiful job. So I usually get surprised in a good way, and especially on Supernatural, because the actors, many of the actors on the show have been on the show longer than any of the writers, because it's been on for so long. So they really know how to take something and make it their character in a way that usually just enhances it.
I find it the most satisfying, when an actor like pluses it somehow. Because if they're just saying my words, word perfect, somehow it's like too familiar. I know how I wrote it, or like how I would say it, so it's not exciting. But when they get the same point across, the scene is what the scene needs to be, but they embellish it, or I don't want to say embellish, but they infuse it with their personality. It's really delightful. But also editing can be heartbreaking, because sometimes like you think you've written something that, and there's scenes you have to write that aren't exciting, where it's just like, can I have a double latte? Like that's the scene, and you try to find ways to like make that something else. So you might just add a joke or some little, bon mot, and they usually get cut. And so then you're like, well, there's nothing in the scene that I can say is like uniquely mine, but that's just kind of the way it is sometimes.
I've definitely written a sweet love scene and gone to watch it on TV, and it's been a rapey, I won't say what show that was, but I've had that experience where I'm like, hey, what happened? I remember the writing. It was like they reach for each other in love, and then you're watching like a rapey. So I've had that.
Oh, it's especially bad too when you see dailies, and the dailies are like, oh my God, they nailed it. And then when you see the cut, you're like, oh.
What
happened to those
dailies? You wouldn't have that
dailies?
problem if you were allowed to use parentheticals.
Yeah, parenthetical, not rapey. Not rape.
No, Tinder.
This was obviously a show where I wasn't on set.
Can you talk about how scripts are... I'm trying to pivot now. It's really hard to pivot from rape.
Rape P.
It's a good quote.
Can you talk about how your scripts are divided up in the room? Sort of demystify this process a little bit. Is there logic to it? Like this script is about something specific that would fit your writing sensibility?
Maybe, but I've never been told. It's just you just get the it's like you're doing episode 3, and I usually like think about it. I'm like, why do they want me to do episode 3? Does that mean they want me to do early episodes? That means I'll get a second episode. Like,
I love that math. That's fun math.
Yeah. Or do they want me to do a later episode? They keep me in the room longer. Those are the only things I know of. And there've been episodes where I'm like happy that I got it, because it's something it's like a story that I was excited about, and I would like to believe that my palpable excitement in the room was heard and that they gave me the episode for that reason, but just as many times I am excited and they don't give me that episode, so I don't know.
I mean, it really runs the gamut from room to room too. I mean, I've been in a room where we all know what we're doing on the first day. It's like, all right, Molly's going to take 8, and then I've been in rooms where you're assigned on Friday, as you're leaving the office. So it's kind of every show is different.
Yeah. I've noticed it usually like sometimes we'll go like down a hierarchy of sorts. Like the top people will write the earlier ones, and then they sort of like go down the line, I guess. But the only time I've had something different from that is I just worked on American Gods, the Stars show. I worked on that last year, and I went in on the first day, like, I have to write the Easter goddess episode. Like, please, God, please let me write about Easter. And they were like, all right, weirdo, like, you can write the Easter episode. And
for you.
I then spent the next like 5 months learning about Easter and Ostara and the pagan origins of Easter. And I just researched Easter for like 5 months and then wrote the episode that, because we kept re-breaking the season. So at one point it was episode 4 and now it's episode 8. It just kind of like moved around, but I stayed with the content the whole time.
Supernatural is like you would literally have to kill me and take my dead body away from the show, because we don't have a traditional writer's room. We pitch 3 or 4 stories each into a pool. They decide, the showrunner and the executive producers decide which stories are going to comprise that particular piece of the arc and how they're going to fit into the ongoing mythology. Then they assign them to us. Then we break by ourselves, board by ourselves, pitch to the showrunners, take notes, outline, and do scripts like on our own. And so what's great about it is you can always go and ask the other writers for help, or can I do my pitch for you, or can you help me through this thing, and or what are you doing in yours, because I have to carry that through. So there is that sense of camaraderie, but there's not a traditional room. And so what's great about that from a playwriting perspective is unless I'm on script, and by on script, I don't mean like writing, but like unless I'm on episode where I'm in that break outline script process, which is about a 5-week long process in total, then I can go wherever. I mean, they're very cool about, you want to go see a production in Miami, you want to go see a production in Philadelphia, you want to go to Phoenix for a workshop. Like, as long as you are keeping them abreast of where you are and you're there when you're supposed to be, they're very, very great. So that show for me as a playwright has been fantastic, because I've been in the ones where you're in the room every day, and it's so it can be so grinding that it's hard to go home at night and be like, no, I'm going to work on my play. Which that sounds whiny. You can still go home and work on your play. But you know, so it's really interesting. I love being in this particular model, even though it has certain pitfalls.
Yeah, Shameless is the same way. You know, I worked in mostly like bank hour rooms where it's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5-ish. And Shameless, I'm not going to say the hours, but we just aren't together as a room that much, but we're breaking our own episodes, writing our own episodes outside of the room. So it's just as much work, but we're less physically demanding, which is nice as a playwright.
So you have 5 weeks to do all that work on a script, Steve?
I mean, that's sort of like a rough, but because you don't, so like last year was my first season on this particular show, and the first episode that I got was episode 6 because of where my pitch needed to fall in the arc. And so I pitched my story. I had 3 weeks longer than the person in front of me to break, because it was going to take them a while to get to me. And then the trick to that is, when they're ready for you, they're ready for you. Like, you don't get to be like, oh, you got to me. Could we just do it next Tuesday? Like, it's not going to work like that.
Is that true on your shows as well, where the amount of time you have to write an episode is dependent on where it falls in the season?
Yeah, I mean, generally you have more time in the beginning, but once, because like usually you start writing episodes before production starts, and then once production starts, they're just rolling. So I don't know, on Orange, like I've had like 3 weeks to write an episode, and then like 1 week to write the second.
They catch up to you at the end.
Yeah.
Here's what's true. It's always a frantic race to the finish line. Always. If you're writing episode 11, 12, 13, you're a little effed. Always. On any show.
However, it's somehow easier, like in the second half of the season, because typically, if it's been a healthy experience, like you've figured out a lot of things by that time.
And you're also really in shape, like as a writer. Like you can just move. You know, there's no designing a playlist that you're going to listen to while you write. No. No, you're in your pajamas writing it.
Yeah, and you're not inventing characters, you know, and just finding a voice. It's just like things are playing
Theoretically,
out.
you're paying off the things that you've been setting up.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
that's what should
That's
happen.
in theoretically.
We have some questions from the audience, and this first one I think is interesting, and I think be great for all of you, but it's actually a question for Nick from Troy. And the question is, something I love about playwriting is the control over your work. How do you handle a note in the writer's room or from an exec that you intrinsically disagree with or feel will hurt the piece?
I tell them I disagree with it and that I think it will hurt the piece. And then we have a discussion until they agree or tell me to shut up. But I mean, that's my experience, again, in like a very specific bubble where I think we're encouraged to have our own opinions, and we, on Orange, we will fight for months over things. Like, things are sometimes not resolved. It's just a continuing, broiling discussion. So, yeah, I just tell them the truth.
That's beautiful.
Is that not the case?
No. This thing is really beautiful. Tell the truth then. Yeah, that I agree. Like, you're allowed to say that you disagree, but especially if you're not the showrunner, it's not your battle. So it's really not worth, I think that we'd all agree, like, we try and go home and like live our lives and be like happy humans. So you don't want to like give so much, you don't want to like fall on your sword for something that doesn't feel like, express yourself and then like move on from it if it's not going to work out, because it usually doesn't seem worth it.
I'll do minor pushback if it's like aesthetic. If it's a story point, then I'll fight harder, because if I can instantly, without having to go think about it, be armed with, well, that's going to do this, this, and this, which we're going to have to deal with, then that feels like that's our job, is to say that. And if they say, okay, well then deal with it, then you have to go deal with it. But if it's like, if I have one of these lovely playwriting character moments that we're talking about and they're like, that needs to come out, then I learned from the orange juice thing to just take it out.
As a showrunner, like, you don't want a room of yes men. That serves no purpose. Like, you want people who have different ideas, because if you could think of all your own ideas, then why did you hire these writers?
I've also learned to appreciate the note, because you can also turn in a script and never see a note, and then it's just rewritten out from under you. Yeah. So I've actually learned that I don't care how much I disagree with the note, I'd rather hear it and have the opportunity to engage in it than to just see that sex scene as I described.
You want a chance. You want a chance to do your version of the fix.
Exactly.
This question is sort of related to that. I can't tell who it's from, but it's for all of you, and it is essentially asking if any of you aspire to be a showrunner, or if you're perfectly happy staying in the writer's room.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're usually like developing things or scheming to have our own shows. Is that not true?
Yeah, I would say I'm just starting to feel like I've really learned a lot, and I've learned what kind of room I think brings forth great work, and I'm just starting to think about what kind of room I would want to create. So I guess, like, even though I'm not sort of in the shower thinking of my ideas, I am thinking about sort of what that would look like and feel like, and where I think I'd be strong and where I'd need to hire great friends. And so, yes.
I think there's something to, maybe mine is too high. We can see you, so I'm going to answer you directly. Is maybe the caveat would be, I would love to show run something that I created. I think there are some people who are particularly gifted at being showrunners, just being showrunners. They can be brought in and they can rescue a show that's struggling, or they can just run something that's brand new and really give it a life that it maybe wouldn't have had. And then I'm not sure, seeing the amount of work that it takes to be a showrunner and the kind of work that they're putting in and the capacity you have to have, I think that I could do that if it was something that created. I'm not sure that I'll ever be someone who could do it for hire.
Same. I should have said that. Yep.
I've yet to come up with a TV show idea. I've been trying for about 7 years. All of my ideas are still plays. I just like they won't come out any other way. So I've been like kind of perfectly happy to help other people execute their TV visions and then to work on my own ideas in the theater. And I'm kind of letting that be okay for now. And if I happen to have a good idea one day, then hopefully I would like to showrun that. But yeah, I think that like all of us probably see how much work it really is. And you've really got to love your characters in the world if you're going to take on that role, because it's a big one.
And even if you even if you stop loving it, you still have to do the job. So like it's better to have something that you are invested in, I think, for me. But again, there are people who are fantastic just producers of television who really know how to show run and will succeed wherever you drop them. And those people always work.
I have a question here from Kelly. Kelly, where are you? Hi, Kelly. This question's for anyone. When you're writing for TV, how much is your work and your own creativity versus writing something for the audience? How much of it is your work, essentially?
I don't know if this answers it, but it is interesting now in terms of Twitter. Fans, especially the younger generation of TV viewers, watch something and tweet about it. So you're seeing moment by moment how your audience is receiving what you're writing, and that can affect a writer's room sometimes. And you have to sort of, I think at the season finale of This Is Us, everyone hated us. I can't remember. Oh, we didn't reveal how the dad died, and we came into work the next day like a little like, people hate us. That sucks. What should we do? Do we, do we respond to that or in our episodes, or do we just continue along the plan that we've always had? And we're going to continue along what we were always planning on doing. But I guess to your question, if you're if you all sort of like stay confident and try and like do what you were planning on doing, but also just be aware of what your audience loves so that you can keep them engaged, you can sort of like continue on what you planned on doing, I guess.
Do you ever knowingly give the audience a nugget they're just going to eat up?
We've done that yet.
We avoid that on I don't know if any of you are familiar with Supernatural, but our fan base is passionate and vocal and large, because most of them have been watching the show for 13 years. And we have new ones all the time because it's all on Netflix now. But it's been around, the fandom has been around long enough that it has divided into factions that support different potential outcomes for the show and things that could or could not happen and things that they wish would happen. And so any given episode is met with some of the most magically supportive and some of the most hatefully vitriolic Twitter things because it's not that they forget, but people just don't necessarily always think that there's someone on the other end of Twitter that can see that. So we have the same thing where we see it go in live, on both coasts. And so, before we're even seeing the episode on TV, Twitter is excoriating us or loving us or whatever they're doing for that particular episode. And so it's really important that we have a tremendous amount of, obviously, gratitude and respect for the fandom, but we have to stick to our plan because they all want different things. They don't all want one outcome for the show. And so there would be no way to be like, I'm going to sneak this in because people are going to, you would get murdered. Not you, me. I would get murdered.
Process question here. This is from Tiffany. Hi, Tiffany. And this is for anyone. Many times while writing, I find myself feeling as if the material I'm writing for TV is stuck in the style of theater. How do I change that? Any tricks of the trade or things that you have learned in those moments when you began writing for TV?
Multiple locations.
I was joking with someone recently that in playwriting school, they tell you to write an interesting scene. You should never start at the beginning, never start with, hi, how are you? You want to sit down? Like a good playwriting scene moves forward halfway through that scene. What I've learned in television, I think, is that you want to move like 3/4 through the scene. Like start where you think it's the last possible line before it has to go. And then that just feels like that's what the medium is. You don't get halfway, you get 3/4. Am I making sense?
Yeah, that's mine. That's mine too. For what Nick said, I think is right. Like, because in playwriting, you sort of are like, now we're all on a boat for the whole play because we can't change the set. So if you start forcing yourself to be like, cut to a magazine publisher's house, cut to the warehouse, then all of a sudden you won't, like if you start getting produced, they're going to be like, hey, get rid of some of these locations because it costs a lot. But then the other thing is definitely the first pilot script that I wrote, I couldn't figure out because I had that same issue. It felt very much like a play to me. And my friend Ross, who was writing on Glee at the time, was like, oh, watch this. And he just cut all my scenes down to a page and a half. And all of a sudden it felt like television because you never have more than a 2-page scene unless it's, I mean, you write on different shows, but we never have longer than a 2-page scene because we've got real estate to cover and 42 minutes to do it. And so it starts to feel like television the more economical you can be with your scenes.
Yeah, I was also going to say begin at the end, where you think the end is. Yeah, I love that we all thought of that. And for me, like when you're writing a play, it's like felt, and when you're writing TV, it's visual, and that's why in our writers' rooms we're on whiteboards, we have note cards, we're moving things around, and I think once you start to think of like your pilot as a episode of television that has scenes that need to be moved around and divided into acts or whatever your structure is, it'll just start to feel less like a play.
That's a really good one too. We'll ask ourselves a lot. In the screenwriters room, we would ask ourselves a lot, what are you looking at? Because it's really easy to fall into like, well, these two characters are, because it was very soapy, it was very easy to fall into, well, these two characters think this and so they're going to talk about this. And you're like, yeah, but what do they do? Are they literally just standing there? Like, what are we looking at while this emotional beat is happening? And I think that is in a similar way activates.
It explains why TV characters never say goodbye when they hang up the phone.
Yeah, we can't afford the line. Yeah, we just got to move.
I always find people to be so rude. These characters are so rude. Say goodbye.
But most of the time now, you won't even see them hang up the phone. It'll just cut out of the scene, so that you don't have to worry about that.
Tune in for all our episodes where everyone says goodbye now.
And then leisurely puts the rotary dial
on both
hand
sides
phone
of the
back
call.
Both sides, yeah.
Bye.
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 It would feel so weird.
I have one final question for everybody. And you all have a foot in television, you have a foot in the theater, essentially simultaneously, right? I mean, you'll toggle between the two. I'm curious, when you are dreaming your big creative dreams, are they TV? Are they theater? Are they both? Feel free to share what they are.
Should we go in order? I'll start. No, I feel like if we were doing like because it's the finale, we should do like I don't know. Lately, like the past like 6 months or so, I'm now working on 3 different musicals, and I love music and musical theater so much. I've loved it since I was a little kid. It's actually how I started loving and knowing theater. And I can't sing and I can't dance, but I can write the book for musicals. And like being in the room when they're being workshopped is the most exciting thing in the world to me. And so I'm kind of currently really fantasizing about being a TV writer and then just writing books for musicals, and that being my life make me very happy.
Gosh.
That's why you wanted to go first, because you just dropped the mic. And
Well,
That wasn't that special. Really? You're right.
it was good.
it's like hummingbirds above your head right now.
Well, I went the other way towards darkness, and I'm trying to write a movie that I can direct, and so I keep trying to think of cheaper and cheaper ideas that someone wouldn't trust a movie with me. So I don't know. I'm making a short film next week. So I'm trying to reinvent myself in some way. It's, well, it hasn't, we haven't seen it, but thank you.
I'm going to say something shocking, which is that my dream is to be a capital P playwright. I feel like I'm a lowercase playwright, which is still a huge honor. Like being any kind of capitalization is an honor, but that's my dream. That's what I've been working for my whole life, and it's really hard to kind of get to be a capital P playwright. So I hope to continue to write in television. I'm writing a screenplay. I really find that hard and challenging and wonderful. I hope to continue to write screenplays. But the thing I'm really hoping happens in my lifetime is that my plays are done. Lots.
What about an all caps playwright?
All caps. I mean, does anyone get to be that?
Shouting.
Carol Churchill.
And here she is.
That would be, you would see me freak out and turn into a pile of nerves. I saw her once at the Public, it was the Public Theater. There was hundreds of people in the lobby, and she kind of floated, because she floats, she kind of floated across, at the other end. I've never met her in person, and she floated across, and someone's like, "That's Carol Churchill," and I literally hid behind a pole. This was 3 years ago. It wasn't when I was little. Because I'm so intimidated. So maybe my dream as a writer is to not hide from Carol Churchill. No, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've never seen her, but I imagine she's someone who could turn you to stone with a look.
Yeah. Or what she can do in 3 words what most people can do in a play. So yeah, she's got that. I will say, I love the capital P playwright answer. I've never been, I sort of a long time ago redefined my idea of success in playwriting, because I've never had a play in New York. My career's been entirely regional, but very satisfying. And so I love that, and I hope that it will continue, but it's hard for me to aspire to that higher thing. But I do think so I think that for me it would be to have my own TV show on my terms. That would be creatively on my terms, not on my terms give me the money, but if I could have a show on television that creatively felt like something that I would do for the theater in some ways, or satisfied that same aesthetic itch, that would feel like summiting, in a way.
Those are all awesome dreams, and I hope they all come true. Especially the Carol Churchill part. Thank you all for being here. You're an awesome audience. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you to SAG-AFTRA Foundation and Dennis Bekah, and a huge round of applause to our awesome playwrights. Thank you.